Hello, BookTube. I wanted to give you a quick update on the newest BookTube event, BookTube at War, which is taking place in July. So you've got time to line up your TBR and gather some books. Yesterday, I made an announcement video about this event, which is a little bit of a rarity because it was created by one of you. It was created by a viewer, not by a BookTuber. It was created by a viewer and a frequent commentator, DDB, who wanted to see this kind of literature highlighted on BookTube where it usually isn't. And in my announcement video yesterday, I mentioned, I guess, a parameter of BookTube at War that I had been told, which is that it did not include nonfiction. So this is not an opportunity for me to reread Thucydides. This is not an opportunity to do that. This includes only fiction. And then after that announcement video went up, DDB and I had our regularly scheduled shirtless Skype session, and he told me that's not true. that he stressed, in his mind anyway, he stressed in his original intention, fiction, because that seemed more inviting. More people read fiction than nonfiction, despite the efforts of Olive at A Book Olive and myself. More people read the made-up stories than read real books. But that need not be true. That need not be a restriction of BookTube at War for any of the many hosts of BookTube at War, or for you, if you want to participate. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that this is war literature, period. It can be fiction, it can be nonfiction, it can be wars that really happened, it can be wars that didn't really happen. This is war literature. I would guess that the only real strict criteria for this is that it not be war adjacent, that war be a central element of the story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So, for instance, one of you mentioned, I think it was maybe Hannah who mentioned Jane Austen, and that wouldn't work. I'm afraid that wouldn't work. It can't be war adjacent. It's got to have war as a central preoccupation. Lord knows that's not going to decrease the amount of books that you can read, and I wanted to add to my TBR. As I mentioned yesterday in my announcement video, that I, of course, went straight to July's new releases. Because that's where I do a lot of my reading, is in new releases in the American book market. And I found quite a bit of stuff, but I ruled out nonfiction. But I wanted to show you a few choices for nonfiction for July. These are new releases coming out in July that I will get and that I will be reading anyway, only now I have a BookTube event for them. The first one is Adolfo Ovs. This is the boy generals of the American Civil War. The phrase being one that's been used for over a century for the fact that on both sides, but especially on the South, there was a propensity to have very young generals, like George R. Armstrong Custer, but there were others as well. And this is the second volume that this author is writing about this subject. I really enjoyed the first one. Really good, very, very granular American Civil War history. So it's nonfiction, but now that counts, then it counts. Then we have manga, believe it or not. But nevertheless, this is by Susumu Higa, and it is translated by Jocelyn Allen. I think her name is. I don't know if I wrote it down. It's Okinawa. Big fat anime of manga of the story of Okinawa by Susumu Higa, who's lived in Okinawa his whole life. And I have a couple of friends that are very involved in the world of Japanese literature. They sing the praises of this thing. So I will try to get it. I think the publisher is one that I've never dealt with before, so I might not be able to, but I very much want to. This is about the war. This is about the war and the immediate aftermath in Okinawa, so definitely on the list. Then we have something that I lived through, and I was buying 4 newspapers a day, so we will see. This is Ghosts of Baghdad. This is a study of Marine Corps gunships on the opening days of the Iraq War by Colonel Eric Ferris Buer. I have my doubts as to whether or not this will be infuriating. It's a very fruitful subject. This is a very fruitful subject for research and for new histories. It will be difficult, in some ways more difficult, to write honest, again, to use the word granular histories of this war, which happened in the lifetime of most of the people listening to me, than it is to find such details for the American Civil War, or for that matter, for the Battle of Hastings. Not because of time's passage, but because a lot of the participants destroyed the records. And they destroyed the records because they knew they were committing war crimes. And the gunships that are the subject of this book very often had roving orders. That is, shoot anything you feel like. Strafe anything you feel like. It does not need to be a designated military target. Strafe anything you feel like. That was definitely true in the military at the time, but it has been vociferously denied, and I would be willing to bet that the colonel here denies it as well. We'll see then. Is this book just a work of resume padding propaganda, or does it have any teeth to it? Those are the two kinds of books you get about the Iraq War. And then one more here this is by James Ellman, and this is MacArthur Reconsidered. This is a reassessment study of General MacArthur as a military commander. This also is a fraught subject, and unlike, I mean, all of the books that I'm talking about are fraught subjects, but this is one at least that I can weigh in on. I can dive into the book feeling completely contentious without any trouble, because it's kind of a dead subject, so I don't really need to worry about it, except to see whether or not the author is going to convince me. My own opinion, MacArthur had an enormous opinion of himself, and other people, very much aided by William Manchester's book, American Caesar, have echoed the opinion that he was some sort of once-in-a-generation military genius. And whenever I encounter a reputation like that, I read the books, and then I read the opposing books. But the main thing I do is look at the campaigns. The primary source documents of what actually happened in the campaigns. In an actual campaign, the actual, tactical and logistical reporting of the campaign, you will be able to determine whether or not the person governing that campaign was a military genius or not. You'll know that from the primary documents. You won't need to have someone tell you. So, and I have looked at those documents, a great deal of them for MacArthur, and I don't see it. I don't see a military genius at all. So the subtitle here, the very title of the book, leads me to think that this is going to be inherently contentious anyway. So I'm all for it. Absolutely all for it. So those are 4 titles that will be on my TBR for BookTube at War, keeping in mind I'm also leaving room for serendipity. I'm leaving room for things, nonfiction and fiction, to come to me. But I wanted to issue an urgent updated bulletin for you out there in BookTube land, that this event does include nonfiction. So all of you that heard the announcement videos, I think there were a few announcement videos yesterday, all of you who heard those announcement videos and went to your bookshelves and thought, well, what do I have that fills this bill? Go back to your bookshelves, because the nonfiction counts as well. And that definitely includes, one of you asked whether or not that includes memoirs, military memoirs. It definitely does if a war is central to the memoir. If the memoir has 10 chapters and the war is over in chapter 1, then probably not. The war has to be central to the book. Any war, whatever war it is, has to be central to the book. But anyway, that's a little update for you for your newest BookTube event, BookTube at War. I will see you all in the hot dog days of July. Thank you, BookTube.